a little shorter this time because it will be just this morning. We decided to travel around the world in 6 events around the concept and the material of ceramic, clay, and all these materials that I decided to put under the umbrella of ceramic because there's so many nuances and so many different styles and materials. It's wonderful to have you. And you coming from very different parts of the world. I can say this time actually from China to the West Coast, to the East Coast, to England, to the States. It's truly international, so it's wonderful. Today, our host is Peter Ting, that you would have met, some of you, when we did the Calling Collect trip, and Peter was behind the camera when we were visiting the Crafting a Difference, the Soshiro house, and then presented us his artist, Helen. It was Helen O'Shea, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was. So
with
Peter,
a recycled milk bottle.
That's right. Peter is an artist. He's a curator. He is a gallerist, and he is more, in my mind, most importantly, the energy that nurtures, promotes, supports young artists. And, you know, there could be no better match for Rupigal than Peter Ting and the Ting-Ying Gallery. So Peter is also a partner in the Ting-Ying Gallery, and his partner are online with us, Eva, and we are going to their studio in Dewa in about 3 weeks' time, directly in China. But today we're going to concentrate on Peter, who is in London, and on 3 of his artists. Christina, Vezzini, and Stan Chen are a pair. They are a couple, and they do the ceramic and glass lighting. We're also going to meet Alice Walton, who is in Wiltshire and is a phenomenal ceramicist that I had the pleasure of meeting when I was in England in October. And then we will go to Chicago to meet Xiyuan Xu, who is also a ceramicist who does paper ceramic. If I can ask you to mute yourself, ladies, please, that would be great, because it seems that there's some interference. So, Peter, I'm going to put the spotlight on you.
Okay.
Here we go. We can all see you now. It's wonderful. Thank you so very much first for welcoming us and giving us your time and sharing your passion. We thought that we would start with your incredible career and how varied it is. And for that, we have a little presentation, but maybe you want, I'm dying to know the objects that you have behind you, because it just looks too good not to mention. What are we looking at here?
Okay, so I'll kind of go through them. So this is a piece of Carol McNichol's work.
Ooh.
Which is an incredible tea set. I won't pick it up just in case it falls apart. This is Morton. I've forgotten Morton's surname, but he's kind of red hot at the moment. But we bought this when he started his career, which is this wonderful volcanic glazes, which I adore. This is the drawing by David Best. Does anybody know David Best? West Coast American artist who he was part of the team. He was part of Burning Man when it first started. And he builds amazing pagodas and things and sets the light to them. And and before I go any further, so Isabel, thank you so much. I can't be hosting this; we're co-hosting. The best, and thank you for inviting me. So, David Best started his life as a ceramicist, and this is a piece of drawing that was done in the 80s, and it is painted on a wheel.
Oh.
Who do we know who's a famous artist who paints on a wheel? So nothing is new. Pieces of work that we have here, that is by a friend of ours, an Irish painter. You could just see a little bowl peeping up here, which is by an illustrator, and you can't really see him. I've got kind of wax figs in here, so you could just see her. So this is really my Smarties bowl. So when I feel the need to sit there, so the line that will be hidden by Smarties. Talking about wax figs, I'll show you. Ooh, forgive the dust. So these are where all the wax figs have fallen off from. They're from Italy, and they are completely handcrafted in wax. So, and they're for the nativity scene. So they're all kind of proportioned in the right size. So if you do a real life one, it would be a certain size. If you do half scale, quarter scale, so they're all kind of a different. And this is the really gruesome one, which I love.
Oh my God! Yes.
Well, so these are the bits of things that we collect, and not forgetting the very lovely basket there by the wonderful Joe Hogan from Ireland. So there's a wonderful story to this basket, and this basket is an enlarged version of a skib. A skib, so is an Irish basket about that size normally for holding potatoes, but it's also used to act as a drainer when you cook your potatoes, so it has a dual purpose. And I fell in love with it. And in my previous house, I had a wall that divided the kitchen and so it's a freestanding wall, so you could see across into the kitchen and from the kitchen into the sitting room. And there is and it would take a piece of work that is exactly a meter wide. And so I commissioned Joe to make this. And Joe is famous for, slow is the wrong word, he takes his time making it. And so I said, whenever you're ready. And then he said to me, it's going to take longer than usual. So I thought, okay, a year. A year passed, another year passed, and then absolutely nothing. And one day there was a knock on the door, and I opened the door, and there was this basket exactly like this with a tag on it. And the postman going like this, I think this is yours. And so I rang him straight away, and I said, there's still email then, but he hadn't email at that time. So I said, Joe, it's arrived safely. And there's just dead silence at the other end. And he said, why shouldn't it? And I said, it's not wrapped. And he said, well, I always find if you post something that somebody can see what it is, they will handle it carefully. And I'll always remember that. And it was just one of the most wonderful things that has passed through my brain.
It's an amazing story. And I just want to say that Carrie is on the, just before we go to your presentation, Carrie Ross is on the call, and you're going to take part in Crafted Vancouver, and we're going to have the privilege of having a conversation with you and Brian and have a little snoop around your apartment, which is so gorgeous. So lady, keep an eye on the schedule. Okay. Let's go.
I won't show you anymore. I won't.
Let's go to our presentation here. This one, of course, it's here we are. So, tell us. There's someone who is not muted. If you don't mind muting yourself, because there's some background noise. Peter, over to you.
Oh, okay. Hi, hello, everybody. So you know who I am. And this is my logo. For myself, maybe I should have maybe put on the studio logo. Apologies, Eva and Yingxin. So I wanted to show you this logo because it is quite an important thing for me. It is a true East-West combination. The square is an inspiration from the Chinese seal, the most important signature and signifier of a person. And then I'm fortunate enough that the T of the Ting in Chinese looks exactly like a T, but with a little hook at the end. So I kind of combined the whole thing together to make it into my seal, which I use to impress on the work. For those people who don't know what I do, this is a fly-through of bits of my career. Next slide. So I left college in my 20s, and I was really, really, really fortunate to be invited by the Museum of Arts in Hong Kong, Art Center in Hong Kong, to do a exhibition, a one-person exhibition. I was in my 20s. I left university, and I was given 2 floors to fill. And I had something like 120 pieces.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Good. Move to Thomas Good. For those who don't know Thomas Good, it's the world's oldest china glass store. If you look at the door in the middle, it's the first automatic door in London. And the pair of elephants are made by Minton, and they were made for the Great Exhibition. So imbued with history and stories. And I designed for them. I was their creative director, and I just had a long-standing history with Thomas Good. So it's a very important part of my life. Next slide, please. So these are one of the most innovative work that I have done. So it's my collection for Thomas Good, and the first time that we have 3 different shaped, you have kind of fluted shaped plates, but I kind of made them completely contemporary shaped plates, and these are in the Victoria and Albert Museum collection. Next, please. Thank you. Then I was headhunted to head up Asprey of Bond Street, as you know, a really old a store, I suppose. It's known as a jeweler, but also for selling leather goods. So I designed all the new, this was Norman Foster interior that he designed and combined the central space to make access to the front and back of the building. Next slide, please. So I designed some glass, and some silver. So this is the games collection. So you can see the coffee cups taking on the backgammon concept, and then the silver drinking vessels. That's a highball, and all shot and styled with a friend of mine called Jan Baldwin, and we've been working. So you see a lot of photographs coming through, and Jan and I have worked together many, many years. So not only do I design, I style the whole concept. Asprey tea set. At that time, I won a scholarship called the Quest Scholarship, which you will hear probably from Alice. She is a Quest scholar as well. So at that time, I went in and to work on digital 3D printing. And this teapot and the cups and the saucers were completely 3D printed. It's a very important thing for you to know that when I got the printed teapot, it was completely dead. It had no life in it. It looked exactly like this teapot, but it had no soul. So I took the model and gave it to my modeler, and he remodeled it, and instantly, with all the slight flaws that only the eye, of hand making could give, it sprung to life. It is the most incredible thing when you see them side by side. Next slide, please. Then I worked for a French company called L'Aigle, and they were part owned by a Chinese company, so I designed a Chinese banqueting set for them. Again, this is shot by Jan Baldwin, styled by me. Next slide, please. So this is the opening. I just wish that I had some close-up. So this is 8 on the Bund in Shanghai. You could just about see it's a double height old 1920s banking hall, and we took over the whole hall, and it was the whole scenography and styling and storytelling. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, I better hurry up. Another full dinner service that I created. It's called Lotus. So I used the lotus leaf to design the plate, and the lotus stem, and the leaf became the handle, and the buds became a knob. Thank you. Next slide, please. You can see that in a contemporary French, in a more contemporary style, but set in a French chateau. Thank you. Next slide, please. And I designed for a company called Love Ceramics in Hong Kong, and this friend said to me, "Can you do something for us?" So I did this. A combination using flower and birds based on Chinese flower paintings and bird paintings. Often the two coexist together to make a contemporary collection. It sold very well. It's exactly what you see modern, and it went out at a really, really good price point. And then, Lord and behold, this is why you never, ever, ever know what the next door would be. Next slide, please. Oh, this is the whole collection. You could see that I silhouetted the flowers within the shapes of the hummingbird. And this is the next step, which was totally unexpected. I was contacted by Oasis, which unfortunately now I believe has closed its doors since last year. Oasis said, "We love your ceramics. Would you like to make a clothing collection for us?" And there it is, the clothing collection. And this is the window referencing the ceramic teacups and saucers that we did. Next slide, please. And here it is. And it was really fun to play with textiles and see it come to life. Thank you. And then I'm a great tea drinker. I adore tea. So my friend Tim Dauphin from Postcard Teas and I got together and formed 1660 London because 1660 was the first time in written history Samuel Pepys wrote about drinking tea. And he said he had a meeting in the morning and then he went off to have a cup of tea, spelled T-E-E, I believe, a China drink. And that was the first time it was recorded writing.
Is the company still alive?
Yes, it is. It is. We kind of, there's so much going on, and I think we could only do so much, and it's kind of static, shall we say? but to watch this space. So these are the cups that we did. The one at the front is to enhance green tea. So this is very much based on the Riedel glass concept. You have the right shape to drink the right wine. And this tea would enhance, these cups will enhance the tea. So the front one is green tea, which is also extremely excellent for drinking single origin coffee. And then the straight-sided one in the middle is for drinking black tea. And then the one at the back is for drinking fragrant tea. Next slide, please. So you see, guess who took the photograph? So then I worked on with Cumbria Crystal, the only British crystal company left, to really modernize their collection. I mean, they were suddenly catapulted because they provided all the crystal for Downton Abbey, and people just became inundated, and yet all they had were historical items. So I helped them create a new collection. This is called Boogie Woogie, based on some paintings. Yes, here you have champagne flutes, buckets, the full lot. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is important because this is where Yingjian and I first met. I had heard of Yingjian because I know Eva, Yingjian's wife, because Eva ran the whole of the design Shanghai for many, many years. And I know of Eva and I know of Yingjian, but I've never met him. And Royal Salute Whiskey asked me to do this enormous art project for Art Basel Hong Kong. And I said to the creative director of Royal Salute at the time, I said, if the person says yes at the other end of the phone, I will say yes too. And luckily, Yingjian said yes. And the next slide should show you the result. No, not yet. So this is where it was. The location was in this medicine museum, Chinese medicine museum. And this is the table. So we have a much longer video and everything, but we don't have time to see that. The invite was made in porcelain. The tabletop were porcelain tiles. The plates are porcelain and gold. The cutlery was porcelain. The cups were porcelain. The egg time was, everything you see is porcelain, apart from the paper menu. Thank you. Next slide, please. So you could see more. So in the middle, those books, we made porcelain covers and had them sent to Amsterdam to be bound into books, and they were used as display. It was just the most incredible, joyous celebration of porcelain. And this could only have been made in China, because in the West, porcelain making is really divided. Those people who could make flat things like tiles could not make shaped things like cups, and vice versa. So I would have never been able to find two companies using the same clay, making the same an object that had to all sit together. Next slide, please. These are my Buddha hand cups and saucers, which is in the V&A. The next slide to show the finished item. This is my first visit to Dehua in China. Next slide, please. So I'm sure people are familiar with this. Next slide, please. And then I made some enormous vases in 2004 for an exhibition in Shanghai. And this is the end result. So you could see how big they were. Next slide, please. And then I designed some teapots, Yixing teapots, and they were all handmade in Yixing. And these are some. So this was my exhibition at Sotheby's, which I curated. No, actually, Janice Blackburn curated this. And I worked with Takashi Yasuda. So he had the more throne pieces, and mine was more design. So I worked with silver, gilding, and bone china and glass to make the collection. Next slide, please. So you can see, so the candlesticks doubled as flower holders on a bone china base, floating, and then the base is all color red, as you can see, sitting next to a beautifully free-formed throne piece by Takashi. And these are based on Wedgwood jelly molds, and I had porcelain flowers made, and then they were all encased in this wonderful plaster. units. I think this piece is actually in the V&A collection. Thank you. Next slide, please. I'm aware that I've told too many stories. I went to Royal Crown Derby and I did a recycling project. So all the patterns you could see on there have been fished out of the waste paper basket by me. And I would go up for a whole week, fish everything out, and then I will book myself in for another week to make things. So this is completely free flowing. And I ended up having a wonderful exhibition at MAD in New York. I think that's the next slide, isn't it? Nope, not yet. Oh, this went into production. So I did a simpler version. It was so popular that I made a simpler version to go into production. Thank you. And this is Eat, Drink, Art Design, a show that was in the Museum of Art Design. And I had a 40-foot wall on the west wing, showcasing. Near the end, crafting a difference, power of people working together. Next slide, please. Another shot of in the same room. And thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Peter. It really, the breadth of your experience, the variety. I just have one question for you before we share the studio of Christina and Stan. Is all the drawings. So you have a fine art training to do that drawing in beautiful design?
No, I'm trained as a ceramicist.
Right.
So I'm trained. So when I first went to college, actually even before that, when I went to a public school, hence my accent, you probably tell. I had a really wonderful ceramics teacher, and her neighbor happened to be Takashi Yasuda.
Oh.
Amazing. Yes, I know. And Takashi had just arrived in the UK, and I used to go and visit Trish. Her name was Trish Phillips, and she said, "Oh, look, our new neighbors arrived. Please come." And so my first vision of Takashi was in the summer, and he was all in white linen, hanging up goat's cheese. He's just made goat's cheese, and it was just dripping on the hung up on his porch. So it was just incredible. So I just carried on and went to our college wanting to be a traditional thrower, you know, cleaving my own wood, firing my own kiln that I've built, made my own glaze, and then I suddenly discovered I actually like champagne rather a lot. So that may not feed the lifestyle I want. So I became a ceramics designer for the industry. But craft skills is at the core of everything I do. Yes, like without that, no product.
I agree. Thank you so much. Well, I think that you'll agree with me, ladies, that it's a real privilege to have shared that story. We are going to go to your first set of protégés, Christina and Pam. Do you have? You need to. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of your
Can you hear us?
We can hear you, yes.
Yes. Can you see us too?
We can see you too. That's all good.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. So
we are better at making the technology.
You know, no matter how many times we rehearse and how much we prepare, there's always a little surprise. So Christina and Stan, thank you so much for having us. You are in London in your beautiful studio under the arches near Liverpool Street, is that right?
Yeah.
And I want to, without going, completely to the roots, I would say that you're an incredible, incredibly multicultural couple. Christina, you are Italian. Stan, you are from Taiwan. You met at art school in London. Christina decided is a ceramicist. Stan is a glassblower. And Christina decided that it made sense to work with Stan as her helper to start with, doing her end of a program project. And then Stan rather liked Christina, and it was the beginning of a beautiful love story, which is now has really grown and developed into a fabulous studio, an incredible business, and a creation of marvelous pieces. I know it's a little bit of a very, very short version of your life, but I want to spend time and concentrate on your art. So tell me a little bit about what you do, and in particular, share with us that mix of the ceramic and the glass and how it started. Maybe we can start from that first project.
Yeah. So the first project that Stan and I worked together with was Close Up. I think you have one image, is ceramics and glass light, part of my degree show at the Royal College of Art in 2013.
Yeah,
so at that time,
I'm sorry, the technology is now playing tricks with me, so let me here we are.
no problem. I know the feeling.
So where are you now? This is,
so I can just describe the piece and then you would see it. So is that like
can you see my
The
screen?
third
yeah,
one.
it's the
So
third slide.
This is the mix of the ceramic and the glass. So this is the first piece.
Yes, this is the first piece Stan and I worked together with. It's called Close Up. Is a ceramic and glass sculptural light. Inside the glass organic form, you have some small ceramic that I call them seeds. This light is really inspired by the diving experience. I'm a scuba diver, and I take a lot of inspiration from underwater, but I also love organic forms and seeds. I collect seeds all around the world. This is part of my collection of seeds. I like to see the structures and the texture that you have in different seeds and the form, the organic form. On the right, you have an image that shows Acropora, which is a sculptural light we create in 2018, actually to show with Ting-Ying Gallery Ecolect. And that's another example of how we take inspiration from our scuba diving experiences. So here, it was more to show how the light filters through the waters in the sea. And there's a key aspect that we always try to show and represent with our work. So going back to Close Up. Yeah. So in this piece, we were working together, but really we were more working together as a maker. So I was designing the pieces, as Stan was more helping me to make the piece, to finalize the piece, as I mainly study ceramics and he specialized in glass. So he was taking part, taking more in charge of the glass element, and I was taking charge of the ceramic element. But we found a great affinity of working together while at the Royal College. Therefore, we decided to try and set up our own studio soon after graduation. I've always found that if I have a goal or something like an exhibition to look forward to, that pushes me to. Sorry.
We can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you.
that helps me to try to push myself and experiment more and try to create. So as soon after graduation, we set up our studio, and we decided to participate at a first show, which was a design show at the.
So it's called London Design. Is London Design Week in Design Junction in 2013.
So I just want to set the scene, because here you are, two young kids, fresh out of school. You don't have a gallery representing you. You've never sold a piece, and yet you just took yourself to one of the most important design show on the design calendar around the world, and you just went and you just plonked yourself there and thought, you know, go big or go home. Is that what the idea was?
Yeah, I think that's always what we think. Either you think big or just stay at home.
Yeah.
And that's what we try. And also, I think, as we had a conversation earlier, as I said, our work it plays between the boundary between craft and design, or if there are even boundary. And I think people always like to put you in a certain box, in a certain category. So at the beginning of our career, we always found difficult for gallery to categorize us, to know where to put our work, because our work can be seen as more design. Yeah. So craft gallery never really been interested in our work. But yeah, we have to say we are very lucky now that we have Ting-Ying gallery and represent our work, and they always push us to create the best of ourselves, really.
We don't then.
Let's have a look then around your studio and have a look at some of the pieces. And I think when we look at the pieces, we'll understand that dichotomy between the craft and the design, and how you have been so masterful at marrying both. So you have a very large studio just outside Liverpool Street, in which you have moved in not so long ago. And you took a really big risk there, which is wonderful to see that. And it's under the arches of the train tracks.
Yeah. So we are outside now. You can still see. Sorry, I don't have my phone, so I can. Yeah, you can still see the arches.
Yeah, everything is good.
Yeah. So we are in a muse with different arches. There are a lot of different creative practices in the different arches. This is our ceramic studio, and beside us are the two ceramic studios. Now you can come inside. Maybe you can hear the train. So we moved here last June. As you say, we started renting this space last June after we moved from our previous studio, which was actually next door. We decided to take this space as we needed a lot more space to work. The previous studio was much smaller, probably a third of the space we have now. So we took this arch, we refurbished it, and we divided it into 4 sections. The area at the entrance, other artists are sharing the space in the front, and we are renting the space at the back. And here on the left, we have a kiln area. And this is my kiln where I fire all my porcelain work. Now, come with me. This is Tom we are sharing the studio with, and his beautiful sculptural work. And this is our space. So our studio is divided in 3 sections: a ceramic part, a glass part, and a metal work part. If you come closer. So this is the ceramic area, is where I make all the ceramic work and the plaster work. Normally my work starts from a plaster master, which is a plaster shape that I either turn on the lathe or make by solidifying a liquid plaster and then sculpting it to create a different shape. I then make a plaster mold, like this. That has different parts. So this will be my plaster master and my plaster mold. And then I pour liquid porcelain inside the mold. And I have made one piece before to show you what's happened. So the plaster absorbs the water and creates a thin layer, a thin skin around the mold. And then you have your own shape.
It's amazing.
I then wait, I get this shape to get to a leather hard stage. I carve it, as you can see here.
Yes.
So this is all carved by hand, different texture, different shapes, different drawing, and then I high fire it. And you can clearly see.
Can you show the difference between where you started in size, where you started, and once it has been fired, how much reduction there is?
The different shrinkage, starting from here to here.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So here is my plaster wall. Basically, I have a lot of plaster master on the top, and then a different selection of plaster molds that I use to create different work with different shapes. And at the back of my ceramic area, I have my secret area, how I call it. It's my drawing table. So I normally sit here, draw different shapes, different form, new work. Sometimes I'm making and an idea comes to my head. So I come here, I start to draw it. I like to have my mood board there with different images from natural from my scuba diving experience, or like this piece is from a window frame of a city, a house in Taiwan, and a lot of different tests of textures, of form. And here I have a throwing wheel. I'm not a thrower, but I like to experiment. I always like to push my skill and try new things. So now I'm trying to throw different small ceramic vases and carve them in different texture, looking at different plants, at different natural forms. And here at the back, I have my lathe, and here is where I turned my plaster master, like the small plaster sphere that I showed you before. Now we can show you one of the work. This is Drape, a work we created last year during the first lockdown, and we were lucky enough to show with Ting-Ying Gallery at Focus 20 at the Chelsea Design Center last June. Again, it's a hand-carved porcelain piece. It was previously just a sphere when I cast it, a semi-sphere, sorry, and then I hand-carved it.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing.
Thank you. This is our water and sand piece. It's more a decorative piece for the wall. These pieces are individually attached to the wall, and we play with the composition, mixing engraved glass and porcelain. We have one of these pieces similar to this at Crafting a Difference now on show with Ting-Ying Gallery. On top, you can see our magnolia light, parts of our seeds collection, where you have semi-sphere engraved glass, and at the center you have a ceramic sphere. And you can really see the interaction and the reflection that the two materials create when they are one against the other, and when the light is introduced. Light is a really important aspect in our work. We always say that light brings our piece to life. And because we take a lot of inspiration from nature, we like to see the connection, how light is so important in nature and really is important for any life. on. So it is also important. Yeah.
Can we have a look at the? I'm just keeping an eye on the timing here. Can we have a look at the big light fixture that you have there, please?
Yeah. You can see it?
Yes, we can. It's amazing.
Thank you. So this is similar to a chandelier we created at the beginning of this year for crafting this difference. It's called In Bloom. And again, you have engraved glass and a ceramic flower in the center. Each petal was carved individually. I will take one to show you. So I make each petal individually. I then like to play with them and try to create what I think is the perfect flower.
It is. It looks absolutely perfect. And
now,
Christina, do you mind asking Stan to pull out a bit to show the full chandelier?
You want to pull out and show the chandelier.
It's phenomenal.
Amazing.
Thank you so very much. I would like to, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat box. And we were just talking about light, and I would like to move now to Alice, because Alice has a way. If I can find Alice on my screen, here you are. Alice has a way of bringing light into her ceramic. It's truly magical the way the color and the light of the piece happen. So, but let's start at the beginning. So Alice, you are in your brand new studio in Wiltshire. When I saw you in October, you had just moved in your house. The studio did not exist, and you've just moved in, I think 2 days ago, finished setting it up for this call. So thank you so very much. And maybe before we start, I think we're all dying to see what the studio looked like. Do you want to give us a little tour?
Yeah, sure. Yes, that would be lovely. Great. So it's brand new. So I'm really excited to show you all. And thank you for having me. So first of all, as you walk in, you can't miss. I designed the studio to have a really large window that looks out across the garden. So it means that when I'm sat at my desk, I can look out and see the birds and be inspired. I'll just pan out so you can see. I've had this purpose-built desk put in. So it means I have 3 meters of table space to work in, spread out and make some large forms. I've got all of my color pigments, and I can show you some of my work in a moment, but color plays a really important role to me. So I've been collecting lots of colored stains and oxides to color the clay itself, or the porcelain. You can see some small samples I've got up here. So I'll just bring the camera down. And I thought I'd show you some of these tests that I've made. I'm just about to start a really exciting residency with Wedgwood as a prize for winning the British Ceramics Biennale in 2019. So I've got a few colour samples just here, and some test pieces as well.
Alice, sorry to interrupt. Can you bring a test piece closer to the camera so it's you can see it better? They pick it up. Thank you.
Sorry. So you can
This
see
is the famous jasper ware that Wedgwood makes.
So the clay has been really beautiful to work with, and I'm playing around with how I can mix different blends of colour. So maybe the jasper chocolate brown, how it blends into their kind of classic Saxon blue colours. Zoom in so you can see the detail.
It would
So
be.
these are some of the.
I thought if you can, maybe we can move to your process, and you can show your forms, and then how you apply. And I will share some photos of finished pieces so we can really see the intricacy of the detail. So take us through the process, and then I'll show the photo.
Thank you. So the way I work is moving to the countryside. It's been really wonderful to go on lots of walks while we've been in lockdown, been very lucky. And the way I work is I walk and I stop and I look at my surroundings. So man-made objects really catch my eye, maybe a certain colour or a tone or a texture is picked out in my mind. And I come back to the studio and I draw from memory. So I'm just really sketching very quickly and seeing, kind of trying to pick up on some of the points that I've really loved about an object. So this sketchbook acts as kind of like a diary, I suppose. Some of the pieces in here I've made, some of them are kept for future makes. And then when I come into the studio, I make directly from my drawings. And this starts by making large-scale plaster molds. So in a similar way to how Christina works, actually, where she starts with a plaster master. So I've cast this shape. And then I end up with the negative form, which I can then press clay into. So whereas Christina showed you how she casts with liquid clay, I press sheets of porcelain into my molds. And the result is, I like to think of them as kind of a plain form, which I can then add my decoration to. So I've got a few samples here and I'm just going to zoom in to show you the detail. So this was made in a mold and then covered in tiny porcelain ribbons, each rolled out and pressed by hand and then placed one by one onto the surface. So you can see, just turn this on its side so you can see the cross section and the detail here. I'm working on a really tiny scale as well. You can see the surface. So I'm really interested in mark making, surface textures, and repetitive, meditative mark making as well. I'm just going to zoom out. So all of the colours that you can see in the pieces here, they are all integrated by mixing some of the pigments that I showed you into the porcelain. And a lot of my work starts with the use of choosing the colours and a lot of experimentation. So here on my wall, you can see a whole colour palette that I can work from. So the powdered pigments are mixed into the clay, and you can see all of the different colours along here that can be reproduced. So it's almost like a recipe where I have this kind of really large resource that I can dip into, make all of the different colours. I'll just come over here to show you some pieces that I've got drying. So because I'm working with porcelain and on a really large scale, when I finish making some of the forms, they can take maybe a couple of months to dry them out really, really slowly. I'm just going to show you the detail.
And I think it's important to say that it's white, huh?
Yes, so although this looks white at the moment, the kiln will really transform the colour. So this piece that you can see here, it's going to be gradiented. So it will actually, you can see a slight hue. So it's slightly green at the bottom and it blends to white, and then it will be pink at the top. And this one, the large one, has got a vertical gradient happening as well. So I've got lots of pieces drying, ready for my kiln to arrive at the end of April. And I thought I'd show you, these are some of my quite messy plans for all of my colours, but they make complete sense to me, working in a really methodical process.
I'm going to share sorry.
The screen.
The screen. Here we are. So we can see the colors that come out. So the amazing thing is your vision. I mean, that because when you're working with the clay, it's that grayish white, and then that what it's going to look like and have the vision. Does it ever come out differently than what you had anticipated, or you've mastered it? I mean, the complexity of this piece is incredible.
I think there's obviously a lot of planning that goes into each of the individual pieces, and I have to work very methodically, so I know where I place each colour that is masked by not having the heat being exposed to it yet. So it's almost like a hidden colour. But I think when a piece comes out of the kiln, it's always a surprise. But I think it's a surprise because it's my idea realised. And I think it's like anything. When you have a surprise, it takes a little bit of time to live with it and to enjoy what has come out. But it's wonderful. I think that's part of why I love ceramics. The unveiling and the opening of the kiln, it keeps you wanting to make more and make the next piece. So I find that the unveiling and the kind of the hidden colour very exciting in my practice.
Can you tell us, for example, looking at the piece that I'm showing now, what inspired that? I'm fascinated that, for example, for you, the first image I showed, this one, was inspired by a bollard. Is that what it is?
This piece was made during when I lived in Bristol, which is a city not too far from where I am now, but my commute to and from the studio every day, I would walk under these railway arches, and I suppose it was quite a kind of a rundown path that I would walk through, and there were all of these bollards that I would pass every day. And the times when I would notice them would be when they would be rained on, and these concrete bollards, which were very kind of grey and drab and passed by every day, they caught my eye this one time when they'd been rained on and the colour had drenched through the concrete, and it was creating this really beautiful linear mark. And this is the first time that I worked with this ribboning technique in a line pattern rather than a completely random, almost mapped pattern. And I think in our everyday lives, we pick up different inspiration, and I think sometimes I might make a piece and I don't have the realization of where the inspirations come from until it comes out of the kiln and I look back at what was happening in my life at the time. So for instance, this piece, I made this during a residency in Scotland, in Cove Park, and the studio was incredible, and it looked out over Loch Long, and the whole scene that I could see every day, it looked like a painting because you could see so far away. And I wanted to make something that had these sort of brush mark like pattern that I can remember seeing from being there. So it's almost like a captured memory for me. And this piece, this is one of my most recent finished pieces, actually, and I made it since moving to the countryside. And around where we live, there's lots of disused viaducts, railway viaducts, which you can walk under and walk past, and they've all been they're quite derelict, they're overcome by nature, so they have twining ivy growing up them. And I wanted to create something, so I generally make individual objects. I wanted to make something that was a pair, so you're not necessarily looking at just the objects, but you're looking at the negative space, this sort of arching formation. So this is kind of quite a memorable piece to me, because it's the first I've made in this new location. And I think it's quite exciting to see how my work will change and evolve as my location has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is a piece that I have on show with Ting-Ying Gallery at Soshiro, Crafting a Difference. And this was a real experimental piece for me. This is one of the first sculptures I made in which I've created this blending tone. So as you've seen on the colour wall that I've got in the studio, the way I test colours is to add a large amount of pigment into the clay, and then slowly add more and more white or more and more porcelain to give a more diluted tone. So say if I'm working with a red, you can make red, you can make all of the different pinks to an almost kind of white, off-white pink. And I wanted to create a piece which had this tonal gradient. So the base where it meets the table is the kind of the full strength of colour. And as the strands become higher to the top of the piece, all of the colours become almost white and off-white. And I wanted something to showcase this process. And I suppose I should say I'm very process-led. So when I'm placing these ribbons of porcelain down, the first one I place then informs where I place the next one and the next one. And it almost tells a story of the pattern and how it's been made over the surface.
That's amazing. I mean, I have to say that when I visited you in your studio and I was looking at these thousands of little pieces of porcelain that are meticulously, it's mind-blowing, and it draws the mind into it, and you just catch yourself following the line, and then you divert a little bit and then you come back. It's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Alice.
Thank you.
It's a very short overview, but it's beautiful. Someone who also somehow works with lines in a way is Xiyuan Xu, who I'm going to put the spotlight on you now. Welcoming us in her studio in Chicago. Hello, how are you?
Hi everyone, I'm Xiyuan. Are you guys still awake?
We are. It's been amazing. So I want to start with your material, because it's called paper clay, but it's not really paper clay. So maybe we can start there, and then you can show us your process. I have some photos, but it looks like you've got lots of pieces around you, so we might be able to do all that live.
Sure. So I started working with porcelain itself way back, and everyone who worked with porcelain before, they will know it is a very beautiful material, but really hard to hand build with. It cracks a lot, it shrinks a lot, it has all kinds of problems. So that's kind of like a love and hate relationship. But one time I took a paper clay workshop a couple of years back. I learned about paper clay. That is essentially adding cellulose fiber in the clay body to increase the strength of the workability and the strength of the clay. And that will just give me a lot of freedom and solve a lot of problems I have experienced before during my process. So since that, it's kind of like my studio savior. And then I just started using paper clay since then. So for the fibers I added in, it's using I use cotton fiber. So those fibers are made for making handmade papers. So when I was in grad school, I accidentally took a Western paper making class and learned about the fibers in paper making process prior to attending that paper clay workshop. So that gave me some knowledge, background knowledge of the fiber aspects. And then I just mix this with my porcelain and then mixed together. So I can move my camera around. So switch. So I have millions of small buckets floating around in my studio. So this bucket here is I break small porcelain piece and mixed with the fiber. And this bucket is waiting to be mixed together. And then here I have some porcelain paper clay that is mixed with the color. So this is a greenish color. And then this is a blue color. So the color looks it right now is not exactly the one it will turn out later. So for example, this is the blue textile of the final piece, and the clay right now is much lighter, and so as the green ones. I think it's this one.
But it's pretty close. It's not as big a transformation as we see in Alice.
Yes.
White and goes to color.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So here is my studio view. So I am currently a resident artist at Lil Street Art Center, and which is about a 20 minutes drive north from downtown Chicago. And they provide me this studio space to work, and I can use their materials and get some free firings. And in return, I do some studio duties. So such as firing kilns for them and teach classes and other random stuff. So because it's in the city, so it's a pretty small studio space. And this is my 2.5 year here in this studio. Yeah.
So can you tell us the inspiration for your pieces? I believe that it's the microbiological world that inspires you.
Yeah, sure. So initially, I started the interest in the micro life form when I was in undergrad school, I ran into this book called Seeds. I have it here. It's a really wonderful book. Probably Christina knows as well because she also has this inspiration. So this book really opened my mind to look at stuff under the microscope. And it's just really fascinating and mind-blowing to see this beauty and sophistication of the tiny organisms.
Mm-hmm.
So
so do you create a drawing first of your piece? What is the, once you have an idea in mind, do you create a drawing and then you follow the drawing when you build the piece? How do you go about it?
yeah, so I usually start it with a quick sketch of shapes. So something like those.
Okay.
So those are just shapes and not the, during the making process, it always changes. So it's just simple shapes that I'm thinking of and from the inspirations I saw from the book or from the collections in my computer. There's a lot of them, and spanning from seeds and to microorganisms in the ocean. And also I look at some of the architecture forms as well, because for me, I'm really into the structures of those organisms. And for me, they are the traces of their growth, expansion, and decay that really fascinates me, and how they engineer structured from this tiny scale. It's just a very interesting thing for myself. So mainly I'm playing with the structures, and unlike the other two artists, my background training back in China in undergrad school, we really focusing on hand building process, hand building skills. So I don't have any mold making, casting backgrounds prior to that, prior to came to the States. So everything is handmade and like singly cut pieces from sheets of the clay. So I have a little bit here. So usually I roll a sheet of the clay. And then this is my favorite tool working in studio. Not many people know, because I added a lot of fiber in my clay body. So it's kind of like leathery when I work with it. So I feel like my process sometimes is like a tailor. So just cutting small pieces from the sheet.
Right.
So like this. So this is kind of like my small slab. I cut into even smaller sizes, like those, like different sizes. So and then construct them together.
Yeah. So once you have built the form, and maybe you can bring one of your elements. You build the form and you fire it once, and it has a color, and then you apply the glaze to it, and there's a whole process on the glaze.
Yeah. So here I'm gonna quickly show you on the piece I just finished building, and it's still drying. So it's being constructed by the like hundreds of those small slabs, and one by one. And then I usually start from the small part, and then growing outside to have the size growing up. And this is I'm using porcelain itself, so it will be white in the color. And then after I fire the piece, the center of the piece will stay white, like this. Maybe here is better, it's backlit. So it's like this piece. So the center of the line here is white. And then I really want to give a very organic surface on the piece. So as you can see a close-up picture here. So the surface of the piece is really textured and very organic looking. And it's made from just a textured glaze. And I spray the glaze on the surface, and then I scratch the middle parts off and revealing the clay line in the middle and do one firing. And then I over and over doing this process again to get the surface texture much bigger. So I have another previous piece. So this one.
How many firings could you have on one piece?
So actually I can do infinite firings, I would say. It's just sometimes when I feel it's done and I'm pretty much done. So some of the piece can be fired up to 10 times. So this piece might be more obvious to show, like this is pure porcelain part and it's really thin and delicate, but this part is glazed with this glaze and over fired many times, and you can see the texture is getting really rough and the whole thing looks more chunky compared to this part. Yeah.
I'm assuming that you are limited. I mean, the pieces are quite large. Do they become heavy while you add more and more glaze, or does it still remain very light because it's a hollow shape?
Yes. So the final piece is actually not too light because all the weight I added from the glaze is quite a lot.
Right. And how long would you say it takes you to go from, you know, the beginning to the end? The minute you, when does the process start? When you grab the sheet of clay, or
Yeah, so as we mentioned that I have a shape that I draw to start with, and then I started constructing with the clay. And because it's really complicated form and very complicated structure, so it takes like 2 weeks, maybe at least, to finish the piece because I have to flip back and forth to construct the piece. It's not I can build from the bottom to top. It's always from one side and then to the other side because the way I construct. And then after it dries out, which takes a while, and then I fire it first. And then my glazing process is very tedious as well. It's just the spraying and the scratching all over, following the line, and then doing this like multiple times to achieve the very textured surface. And then when I feel it's kind of done, it's done. And then I'm trying to increase the scale of my work, but sometimes it could be a problem as well because the limited size of the kiln we have. So I think the one on your slides that the piece was in the kiln, I didn't measure the piece when I was making it. So it was quite a headache when I tried to load the piece. It just barely fits. Yeah, so this one, it barely fits in the kiln. And actually the side of the piece is touching against the kiln wall. So I learned that next time I will definitely measure more.
I'm just showing some of your pieces here, finished pieces, and then this photo for scale and show how large your pieces are. Thank you so very much. Really, I think that we've we've covered the whole gamut here of inspiration, from underwater world to urban elements to microbiological shape and different techniques. I don't know if you have, we only have a few minutes left. I don't know if you have any questions, maybe, or that was quite fascinating. And thank you so much to the audience for having us. If you have questions, just unmute yourself and just ask your question if you have any question. No question?
I'm aware of the time as well. I just hi Isabel. I just wanted to say thank you to all the three artists for showing us their wonderful studio. But more so, I think it is for somebody, you know, I understand the process from beginning to the end. And I haven't seen Alice's studio, I haven't seen Xiyuan's studio, but I know what goes through. I understand by looking at the piece. But when you actually see someone working, you see that intricacy. It is extraordinary. It really is. It still amazes me after all these years. I look at Alice's tests. I look at Xiyuan's layers and layers and layers of glazing. I look at Stan and Christina's precision in making and carving. I mean, it's astonishing.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Blow me away. I am blown away.
And you are a ceramicist yourself, and
I am in training. I think I'd like to come to England or to Chicago and hide in one of your studios for a year. I have so much to learn. I'm like tearful.
Well, we'll when we travel, you'll come with us, and
beautiful.
Yes, we'll try to do maybe some workshops or things like that. Thank you again to the three artists. Peter, thank you so very much for welcoming us and for nurturing such amazing talent.